Hey folks, I hope everybody's doing well. This is a short review lecture designed to touch on what we did in the midterm and some of the stuff we're going to be doing, especially in Module 5 and a little bit in Module 6. So, with that having been said, a couple of test questions you received. The first one, of course, was meant to be an easier one. We've had that question once or twice before. It was meant to be a little bit of an easier question to help along as you're going through the tougher ones. For the world systems theory question, of course, all of these are important, but the key point I was trying to get folks to see is the nature of dependency in the world system as a whole, and this idea especially that dependency doesn't end. It is a structural part of the world system. In fact, that is what makes it structural. And this is what makes this kind of explanation about inequality different from, let's say, Malthusian ones, which you read about, or other kinds of, let's say, behavioral economist ones, which identify certain forms of behavior optimization, etc., incentives, as ways of reducing, minimizing inequality in the world. These are different choices and they lead down to very different places as we think about these issues. And so I want to expose you to a few different options. And of course, you can make up your own mind, ask me questions, carry on the discussion further, and so on and so forth. Last but not least, the question about culture is that culture is used to describe definitely not cultural artifacts like ruins. We're not doing archaeology here, folks. Not really movies. I like talking about movies, but it hasn't been a big part of this course. But of course, global norms and rational understandings that circulate globally, which of course will be a big part of our modules 5 a little bit, but especially 6 on NGOs and INGOs. So for the organization of the class so far, this is just a little bit of a review of where we've been so far. Module 2, of course, fed directly into Module 4, and a little bit into Module 5, since war, of course, includes both state behavior and world economic structures. But it also includes culture. Cultural norms and understandings of what is permitted, what is not permitted, what is allowed, what is not allowed. And we, of course, will then broach that further in Module 6 when we talk about NGOs and global society, and the notion of NGOs, or TNGOs, as your textbook describes them, as the building blocks of a certain idea of global society or world society, and of globalization as a whole. And we have some really cool materials there on global environmental movements, especially as a way of fleshing this out and giving you some more case study materials, which is sometimes, I think, a little bit less dry than the stuff in your textbook, which is useful, but ultimately a little bit bare bones and not always the most entertaining material to read. So here's just a quick little sketch of some of the material we're working on in Module 5, where we're looking at warfare as, on the one hand, an element of states and statecraft. States make war, a little bit of a typo over there. States make war and war made the states, as Charles Tilly famously said. But it's the idea of warfare as a central tool of what makes the modern state system a state system. But of course, that doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in the context of a global capitalist world economy. And so this is where we get global arms markets. This is where we get markets in force. In other words, markets in the use of force on the part of private military contractors and private military firms who offer basically force for sale or protection from the force of others for sale, and how this becomes an integral part of the global economy as we go forward into the 19th and 20th centuries. And then last but certainly not least, weaponized narrative really introduces an interesting cultural dynamic into all of this. The ideas of identity, narrative, and selfhood as central to our ideas about the use of force, and as, in a way of mobilizing and organizing the use of force. So we have a few different readings on this. starting with the Allenby Gaho text titled, appropriately enough, Weaponized Narrative, and then Jamie Horowitz's short piece for the SSRC blog. Jamie was actually a student in global studies and completed an honors thesis on disinformation and misinformation in the relatively recent past. So I hope this is useful in terms of situating where we've gone, where we're going, as usual. Feel free to ask any questions, post them below, write me emails. I'm always happy to hear from people.